Hello and good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to start now the famous open data block of the European Data Summit. And one quick remark, why is open data from my point of view so important? Because you have the possibility that you don't think about the business model. And first, the whole legal stuff, if you're using the old data definition, that's non-personal data related. And once you have that layer, you can try out things that in the long run, you use that expertise, that means also like training of people, to find out something new. And with that having said, one great story from a few years ago, because we were talking on the panel before, was somebody talking about medical data. There were Finnish My Data guys in the room upstairs, and they told the Germans like how great it would be to be able to share medical data. And the Germans like, my God, what the fuck you're doing sharing medical data? And the Finnish people, the answer was like, what could possibly go wrong? And I think to have like these two big diverse connections on a point of view, what you could do is one great thing when the people talking together. And I think the summit should be this way, that you have on the one side policymakers, then you have lawyers, then you have civil societies, then you have people from science who have, for whatever reason and interests, a different approach. And you need a basic understanding of what data should be. And then also, when we're talking about competition, that cooperation actually could be giving you advantage once you share the data or you enrich the data. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to David Zamora. He will show us the status quo of the global open data Barometer, which shows like which country is leading in which area when it comes to have like a certain data accessibility. And afterwards we talk on a panel on data and transparency. We will open up the panel quickly so you can join us. And now I give the word over to David to show us where we're standing worldwide in competition, because this is also the international panel with, he's from Costa Rica. We have then a guest from India, from Germany, and also from the UK. And so the floor is yours. Please start your presentation.
Okay. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I hope I bring some of the warm weather of Costa Rica to this conversation and presentation. So I wanted to initiate asking who of you know or heard about the Global Data Barometer? Please raise your hand. 2 hands, 4 hands. Okay, great. There's even a little more people than one expected. So we are a research organization, mainly from Global South. And we do this assessment where we evaluate data foundations for public good, for AI, for open data, open government, and other issues or layers, or applications and services that could grow up based on the data that we have, that everyone has, in every country. The way we conduct this assessment is by evaluating 4 main pillars. So this is our assessment framework. We conduct this evaluation in over 100 countries, and we evaluate the data governance in those countries, mainly talking about frameworks, regulations existing in those countries about how data is managed. We also evaluate the data capabilities in those countries, the data availability, how much data finally is available for people, what's the quality of that data. And then we also evaluate the use and impact that the data is causing in the country. So a few facts about our research. As I mentioned, there are over 100 countries evaluated, specifically 109. Our assessment has over 60,000 data points. That's what's covered. Over 1,000 data sets have been evaluated or were evaluated in the Global Data Barometer. Over 900 frameworks related, again, to data management, and more than 70 open data initiatives. These 70 open data initiatives are actually the only ones existing among the 109 countries. So there's one specifically for Germany. I will talk about that very soon. I would focus the findings as you may expect a presentation about a barometer. You expect to see some numbers, and I will be sharing some of those numbers along with some implications with what those numbers mean. So I will focus the conversation mainly on the European Union. So we evaluated 29 countries from the European Union, and you say UK, you can see there UK has a mark, it's not part of the European Union, but we consider it, I mean, in terms of the organization of how the data is disclosed somehow. Per regions, basically just as the thing. In terms of the performance, as I mentioned, right, we have these 4 main pillars. And you can see in the kind of the blue shape, the bigger blue shape, that's what the European Union looks like. And then the green in the center, that's the global average performance, including the 109 countries. So there you can see, generally speaking, that something that what anyone could expect is that the European Union performs better than the global average, of course. But the data also tells some interesting facts about this. Like, for example, you can see that the same case as the international average, the European Union also is having challenges in terms of demonstrating the impact that the use and impact that data is causing. So this region is having as well some challenges in that topic. You can also notice that availability, for example, is the pillar that has a bigger gap compared to the international average. That means that there's more data available in the European Union compared to the world. But again, you see that the use and impact that this data is causing is not substantively more compared to the international average. Just to mention a couple things related to that. If we take a closer look to Germany, here you can see in the red color of the shape, again, the 4 same pillars. And then on the red color of the shape you can see Germany's performance in these 4 main topics. In gray, you can see Estonia. Estonia is the top performer of the region. And then in gray, that's the European Union average. Okay, so again, the very interesting fact about Germany performance is I'm pretty sure everyone is looking at it, it's related to use and impact. So what this actually is telling us is that the country is having some difficulties in terms of showing how much impact the data that's available is causing compared to other places in this same region. To move a little forward, this in this slide, what I wanted to say is a couple comments related to the data governance. The data regulations existing in the country. So on the right side, you can see what type of regulations or frameworks are performing quite well in the country, and then on the left side, you can see other regulations that are performing poorly. So the data protection law, this has been an extensive conversation so far in the event. In terms of how the law is structured and some key points about the content of the law, so it's scored very high or it has the highest score in the evaluation. And also the data accessibility framework, that's the framework that requests that data should be available for people with disabilities. So there's a good also framework related to that topic. On the other hand, you can see that there are some frameworks that are having some issues, maybe, in the country. So the first one is the language data governance. This means what we evaluate here is that once there has been established official languages in a country, Then we look at the regulations to see if there is a mandate to publish data in all the official language that has been set in the country. So this is something that seems to have some areas of improvement, as well as the data management framework. At the data management frameworks, what we evaluate here is if there are standards about metadata, standards on how to publish data, how to update that data, if there are common identifiers, some standards about enabling easy interconnections between the data. So here also there are some areas of improvement that we can see from our evaluation. And the open data policy also, it has some areas of improvement as well. Okay. When it comes to data capabilities, this is the third pillar that we have. We can see that subnational data capabilities, this is pretty much local governments, what are their capacities to release data, to manage data. We're seeing a good performance here. And then we also see a good performance on the Open Data Initiative. The Open Data Initiative is related to if there is a government agency somehow leading open data, if there is some funding, if there are some roles and so on defined for this program to move forward. And then we see in the capabilities some challenges related to civil service training. So we're not seeing, it's not being so evident whether there are specific trainings about data management and data usage for civil servants. Also, the government support for data reuse. Also, we're seeing here some areas of improvement. And this is pretty much saying that maybe the government could do a little bit more to see more use cases and more impacts related to the data that we have available. When it comes to data availability, we have set a number of data sets that we consider they create public value. And we evaluate how available are those data, not just in terms of if the data set it's online, but in terms also of the content of that data. We call that elements. So there are specific elements that we evaluate within each one of these data sets. And within these elements, there are also questions or requirements in terms of openness, specifically addressing open data. So if, for example, if the data sets are available in machine readable formats, if they are available as a whole, if they have an open license that allows free use of those data sets. So it's not only content in quality content, but also quality in terms of how the data is placed for other people to use. So from this chart here, going from left to right, you can see what are the data sets performing the best in the country to the data sets that are performing poorly. So you can see from the land use data set, it has all the possible points that we evaluate. So it's that's something very positive. And then there's a few data sets also performing quite well. COVID-19 vaccination, real-time healthcare system capability, and also budget and spend data. And if we move to the other side of the chart, we can see some data availability challenges in the country. So apparently land tenure, it's a data set that's not available for people to access. Company register also is a data set that is available, but with very strong limitations in terms of how people can access that data and how easy it is to use it, again, in terms of the format that that data set is put available for the people. Then lobbying data and beneficial ownership, like there you can see some of those that also are performing somehow poorly. But I wanted also to call the attention those with the red sign there, because those data sets actually have a score that is below the global average. So this global average is something interesting because, again, this is the global average of 109 countries, which include all global south, or a lot of global south countries. So interesting to say is that these data sets actually have a poor performance compared to the international average. So it's land tenure, company register, and public procurement data. And we will talk about public procurement data in a while and talk about the value that this data set has and how it's creating value in some other countries in the panel. This is just, I think this is the last slide I want to share, so we have some more time for the panel. Here you can see some of the limitations that we specifically identify from the different data sets. This is just as an example that you can see how deep do we look actually in the evaluations. And if you remember, public budget and spend data actually was a data set that was performing good, but yet has several improvement areas. So all these bullets that you can see in the red square, they are opportunities or limitations. Let's say it's better to say some limitations related to that data set. And company register was a poor performing data set. Also, of course, you can recognize that there are some also limitations with that data set. So the first one, pretty much the limitations is more based on the content of the data. There are limitations there, but in the company register, you can see there are some limitations related to the format. Again, it's not open in license, it's not in a machine-readable format, the data set is not available as a whole, which are very basic things that have been part of the open data conversation since more than 10 years ago. So it's interesting, and I think it calls also the attention, or should call the attention. There are a few more things that we can specifically address about open data, but I think we will leave this for the panel. And for those of you who didn't know yet, before this presentation about the Global Data Barometer, this is our website. There you can know a little bit more about the methods. I'll be more than happy to talk about anything later after this, about methods, about the research, and how we're performing this in several countries at the same time. At this point of time, we're working on the second edition, so in the next few months, we will start a new evaluation. And yes, that'll be it from my side, so we can proceed with the panel.
Thank you so much, David, for your presentation. Please choose a chair, and I welcome on the stage our panelists. First of all, Bernardine Franz from Open Contracting Partnership UK. Since Wilfried is already standing here, join us. He comes from the Policy Boiler Room in Germany, as you can say, the Federal Ministry of Interior and Community. And it's my pleasure to welcome my brain, Gaurav Godwani from India. He's on the Open Data Lab. He will give us that perspective of what we can call, it's like the elephant in the room. It's like one of the big countries who actually does open data, is democratic, has election this year, and we're moving that away that Germany is always like saying like we are too big compared to Finland, that we can do open data or anything innovative. So welcome on stage, and first of all, since not all of the people knew the Open Data Barometer, may I ask who knows what open contracting is? Please raise your hand. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So maybe that's a good possibility for you to introduce what you're working on it and why that open data part is actually also beneficial for companies, society, democracy, and so on, and also drop some numbers since people like to hear numbers.
I can. Is that good?
It's, I think, still.
Maybe now.
No.
No, good. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Walter. Great to be here, and huge thanks to Pencho for inviting me. So I'm from the Open Contracting Partnership. I'm delighted that there are 3 people in the room who've actually heard of us. So what do we do? So the Open Contracting Partnership, or OCP, we work with governments, businesses, civil society, various different actors to transform public procurement for the better. The reason for this is that there's a huge amount of money that's spent on public contracts every year, $13 trillion that's spent on everything from pens to paper to roads and schools and hospitals. And all of that is money that you and I pay in taxes, and so we have a right to know what happens to it and how it's spent. So what we know is that this vast amounts of money is often not spent well. There's a lot of leakage. So whether it's corruption or mismanagement, inefficiency, there's a lot of leakage from public procurement. We know that almost 60% almost 60% of OECD foreign bribery cases involve bribes for public contracts. We know that 30% of companies in the EU tell us that bribes prevented them from winning contracts. So there's obviously something that's going on here that we need to solve. And so a lot of the work that we do is really looking at how can we make things better. And it's not always corruption. It's also, as I said before, mismanagement, inefficiency. So our starting point for all of this is data. So how can we use data to transform procurement, to deliver better outcomes, whatever those better outcomes might be? It could be improve competition, reduce corruption. Increasingly, we're being asked to do more on climate change, sustainability, equity, inclusion, things like that. So our starting point is data. And we have a couple of data standards, which the 3 of you in the room might have heard of. They're called the Open Contracting Data Standard, or OCDS, and the Open Contracting for Infrastructure Data Standard, OC4IDS. I'm not going to bore you too much with data standards, because it's quite technical and it's quite boring if you don't work in data. But the single most important thing that I want you to take away from this is about how to make data useful so that we can do all the wonderful things that we want to do. So, for example, if you think about date format, 12/03/23, that means different things in different places. In some places, it means the 12th of March. In other places, it means the 3rd of December. So if you think about these different formats and something as simple as a date, and if you want to automate analysis, that could give you very different results. So you could get perverse results if you think about start dates for contracts or end dates of contracts, for example. And that's just date formats, right? So the key thing that we're trying to do is think about how can you standardize the data to make it easier for analysis and to make it more interoperable. So very often when we talk about data, people think about creating more systems, more platforms, more databases, lots of, which are chunky and hard to do. But if you standardize your data formats, it allows different systems to talk to each other without having to create a new system, a new database. And that makes things a lot easier. So our starting point is data, but it's not the end point. So data is only a means to an end. How you use that data and how inclusive you are in the use of that data and in the processes that you create as part of public procurement makes a difference in terms of the outcomes that you want. Obviously, the more data that you have available publicly in the public domain, particularly in public procurement data, has benefits. We all know this. Research tells us that the more open your procurement is, the more bidders are likely to bid. The more bidders they are, the prices go down, and you make savings, things like that. But I want to share with you, in closing, a very concrete example of how this plays out in reality. So it's an example from Colombia, where we've been working with the government there for a long time to transform any number of things in public procurement. And this specific case study is about school meals. So in Bogota, it was discovered that there was a problem with the school meals that were being bought by the government. Mainly, the school meals were overpriced, so apples, pears, bananas, sandwiches, chicken drumsticks. They were sometimes 4 times higher than the market prices. Chicken drumsticks at the extreme were being priced at $20 per drumstick. Like, we don't even get that in the UK, which is where I live. So there's obviously a problem there. And worst of all, some of these meals that had been paid for weren't being delivered, so children were going hungry. Now, when we all looked into the data, what we discovered was that there were very few companies who were bidding and winning contracts. And when you look into it further, what you realize is that the reason this was happening was because the tenders were bundling things up together. So not only do you have to provide the sandwiches or the apples and bananas, whatever it is, you also had to distribute it across the school network. What that meant was that many companies couldn't participate because they just didn't have the ability. They could do one or the other. And so that excluded them from the process. And because of that, a few companies kept winning contracts. They were colluding to keep prices high. So as a result of that, what the government did was that they unbundled those contracts so that it opened up the market and more people could participate. And then on top of that, they also introduced matchmaking processes so that suppliers could join up together to get a bigger share of the contracts. So those are that's a very concrete way in which better use of data combined with participatory processes can help to deliver results. And what we saw as a result of that was that supply diversity quadrupled, so exponentially increased, prices went down, and more importantly, 800,000 school meals were delivered to children all over the city every day. So I'm going to leave you with that in terms of one of the benefits of what more and better data and public procurement can do for you.
So thank you so much for that overview. And then the curious question would be, since we hear about like what impact that can have, and we have seen from David before in the presentation that especially in that direction, the German data is a little bit missing. I would say if you're like averaging below the global south, maybe Wilfried, you can give us a short introduction on what you're working right now and also what are like, from your point of view, the obstacles to, or what are the legal or societal obstacles why we are lacking in Germany these three areas of data.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Pencho, for the invitation to this great conference. I'm working for the Ministry of the Interior in Germany, and actually in the department, we call it Referat, so it's 11 people, 10 people that are competent for open data. So actually I'm the right man here to defend the German practice. I have to admit that I'm not very well prepared because it would have been better. I would have looked into the details of this barometer so that I could have said, oh yes, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to go into the details too much. But of course, as you all know, these barometers are, have their flaws. Maybe not yours, but I have found another barometer about the freedom of information right globally, where Afghanistan was on the first place, and South Sudan on the 12th place, and Germany is somewhere between 120 or 125. And then I looked into the details and I found out, for example, that the parameters were quite good, but they missed the point that law in the books is not law in practice. And Afghanistan, for example, got 2 points out of 2 points for freedom of information as a human right.
So to top it off, Austria, where I originally come from, we were back in, I don't know, like 131 or second till like we got a new law this fall. Having said that, but when you take the three data sets, I think especially like company registry, which is interesting to the companies, we have the same issue in Germany. It's not open, and we have the complete comparison to countries like the UK or Nordic countries where this is common. So we always sometimes ask, is it the water in Germany, the air, the flat land, the mountains, or what are the certain reasons why it's stuck there that you actually have like that transparency, which is also like a way to have less friction for businesses doing their day-to-day job?
I don't want it to make fun of a barometer now, but if you look into the details, it's of course much more complicated. We have a lot of registers in Germany, and for each register, like the land register, like the Melderegister, where you have to give your address, for all of these registers, you either have no restrictions or you have some justified restrictions, or at least there are a lot of people who think it's justified to restrict that you can have open data there. And then we have an open data regime. And all those open data should be published on a transparency platform called GovData. And I'm sure you you did a research on that as well. But yes, there are a lot of problems, mainly legal problems, legal restrictions that prevent data from being open data, or even prevent data from being published. So if they are published, they are not, you said that, not automatically open data, but they have to be published in a open data format, in a machine-readable format. They have to have certain metadata and so on. So many of those register data are not fulfilling the definition of open data. But on this transparency platform, there should be a lot of open data categories that are published by the lender, the regions, and by the federal level. But of course, I admit that we have a compliance problem. In 2019, the open data law, the e-government law, was at the last time got a refurbishment, and we have an obligation to publish certain data as open data in Germany. But it's only an objective obligation. So there is no right of the citizen to get those data. But that right should be introduced within the next 1.5 years. And then we have the cultural problem. We are talking about authority data when we are talking about open data. At least that's the definition in Germany. I know that's the definition, not always the same. So it's data that should be trustworthy, that should be true, that should be of high standards. And in order to publish those data with these standards, with these quality standards, you cannot just push the button, but those data have to be prepared. And they have to be prepared in order to become open data, machine-readable data, and so on. And that is, that demands lots of capabilities for each employee of the state who is working with these data. So I'm sitting on my desktop, and I have to do my regular work. And at the end of the day, I should think about the question, is these data that I just work with today, is these data fulfilling the open data definition, and am I obliged to to make them public now, or a month later, or next year? And in many cases, we are lacking those administrative, procedural obligations. We are lacking procedural processes that make it possible for every employee of the state to come to this point where he says, oh yeah, this could be open data. And now I have to examine all the legal restrictions. And after examining those legal restrictions, data protection law, trade and business secrets, and so on, then I decide, yes, I push the button and make them public. No, I'm not at this point. They have to be barrier-free. Maybe I have to blacken personal data first. Maybe I have to ask my boss first if they are not security reasons, and those security reasons may prevent the publishing as open data. So there has to be a process where all this is done, and then hopefully in the end they might end up on this transparency portal, GovData. That is only one of the big problems we have to deal with.
After you heard like what a German serious Beamter has to go through in his daily life, and maybe you give us like a more enlightened experience from India, what your challenges are there, what are your best practices and how you see open data, since it's like a long-term project already for more than 15 years globally, the next steps.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Pencho, for having me here, and it's an honor to be part of this panel. So I would suggest what India is going through is a bit of a transition. So we had our open data policy in 2012, and then we have our open data platform, data.gov.in, very similar to the German open data platform in 2014. And like you would expect, like there are a lot of data sets there, but some of them are not of high quality. Some of them are not getting updated on a timely basis. Some of them don't follow specific data standards for you to make that data sets interoperable with other data sets and try to derive meaningful use cases in a timely manner. So what we are sensing is a need for a transition to a unified data exchange where we adhere to open data principles, but broaden the applications to do data for public good. The government of India is also recognizing that in absence of the voluntary chief data officers not able to produce enough data sets in public domain, communities and civic tech organizations, civil societies, think tanks, and even businesses have come forward to share publicly available data in a much more standardized manner. There's a rise of different open data portals, more use case driven, be it open data portals around public finance, justice, climate action, and a couple of other priority sectors. We are seeing those coming in. So with this unified data exchange, the opportunity here is to bring in all those data sets discoverable at one place. Make sure their metadata is aligned to one common data standard, which has been agreed by World Wide Web Consortium, and make sure that these data sets become more discoverable, even if they are not completely licensed in open access. Even if they are in restricted access, at least the metadata needs to be discoverable so that we can have more use case-led approach of what we can do with these data sets. We have already seen private players sharing some of the data sets in public domain. Of course, those come with some restrictions, like you can't use them for commercial purposes, etc. One such use case is data sets around digital payments, because with our focus on increasing resilience on digital public infrastructure, digital payments become one of the major cornerstone for our digital economy, and we want to understand how is the penetration of digital payments happening in the country. So private players who have been leading deployment of some of the digital payments in the country are releasing data sets around how much is the penetration here in remote geographies, how much digital transactions are happening on a monthly basis, etc. Of course, anonymized, of course, aggregated to an extent to protect privacy of the citizens. So we are seeing those use cases, and I would like to check with you if the audience has ever drank Indian tea. Raise your hand if you have ever had a chance to have an Indian tea. So most likely, if you have had Indian tea, it would have come from the northeastern part of India, which is known as Assam. And it's one state with whom we have been working for the last 6 years to improve data sharing principles and open data commitments. So this small state in the northeast is also affected by floods every year, and causing big devastation, of causing 5 million people commuting, leaving their houses to other pastures, causing close to $25 million damages to property and other economic losses. So we wanted to see what we can do to improve flood resilience in the region, and how can we improve preparedness towards floods. And when we started to look into different data sets, all of them were siloed. There were piles of data sets sitting in different departments, not talking to each other. So we started to work with one department at a time and try to get all of these data sets digitized, standardized, make sure they talk to each other on a regular basis, ensure that the data officers also meet regularly and discuss some of the data issues. And what we've seen in just last couple of months is adoption of these data sets together to improve government response for floods. Data sets related to public finance, losses and damages, satellite imagery, data sets related to vulnerabilities. All of these data sets, which were earlier not talking to each other, now are coming at one platform. Now they are being used to improve insights about monthly preparedness for floods in the region. And we are hoping that in upcoming flood season and in upcoming years, there would be more agility in the government to invest money for the areas which require more attention. So earlier, these decisions were taken based on the loudest voice in the parliament, like this particular region requires more money because they are just asking for it. Now that decision is being more data-driven in nature, where you can clearly see that this particular area require more attention for the upcoming monsoon season. So that's the kind of change which is possible if we make this kind of data ecosystem where we invite different stakeholders to discuss their data on a regular basis and create that data culture. I think the last panel also talked about it a lot. It's a continuous incremental effort which is required to motivate all the stakeholders to work together. And it can't be just government. We need to bring in multiple stakeholders, like civic tech organizations, think tanks, private players, and encouraging them to share data for a use case like this, which affects everyone.
Thank you. I think you wanted to make a quick remark, and then I'm sure Winfried wants to make a quick remark, which we're running short on time, but it goes into the direction when we're talking about open data. What is open data regarding flooding data in Germany? So,
I can start. So this is one of my favorite projects as well. So we partner with Civic Data Lab on this amazing project, which is now, I think, I just wanted to say, worth mentioning that scaling to 3 other states as well. And of course, Gaurav mentioned that Assam is a small state, but there's 40 million people there. So it's larger than some countries. So it's pretty big. It's now scaling. That's really cool. I think 2 things I wanted to say. One is that the thing that really strikes me about this project is that it enables better decision making, not just at the top level, but also at the bottom level. So as Gaurav mentioned, one of the big challenges at the state level, so the State Disaster Management Authority was struggling with, they were getting proposals for what type of flood infrastructure to build, for example, and they were responding in an ad hoc basis. As Gaurav mentioned, the loudest voice gets the most attention or the most allocation of resources, or it's first come, first served. But now, based on the data model that Civic Data Lab developed, they're able to make a data-informed decision on where to prioritize that public procurement spend. And at the same time, we're also seeing at the district level, so going down the value chain to the districts, so district disaster management agencies and authorities are using the data model to improve the proposals that they make, because they're also saying that actually they don't know what the most urgent need is in their own districts and revenue circles. So you're getting this sort of better decision making at the top level, but also better proposals and better ideas at the bottom level going up.
So quick remark of when we normally talk, or me or Open Knowledge Foundation or the civil society in Germany about open data, we say it's like non-personal related data because it makes the discussion easier. And Winfried will shortly explain why the flooding data in Germany is
it's incredible, as if we had talked about this before this speech, but we did not. This is my favorite example why data protection law in Europe is broken, or at least in Germany is broken. We had the same thing. We had a flood catastrophe 3 years ago, and authorities started to do so-called Starkregenkarten, means heavy rain maps. So those maps showed how the land was flooded, and they showed it on the level of each part of the land. What's my Grundstück? Registered land. And then the data protection authorities came and said, oh, this is a nice map, and the map were really well done. They were good, and we have this data, and our authorities are able to do incredibly good maps. But you are not allowed to publish that because of data protection law. Because with a couple of more data, you can easily find out who owns this land. So they are personal data. And for example, I had then hours of discussions with the data protection authorities if this is personal data or not. Of course, there are always two opinions. You also could come to the result that they are not personal data. But in the end, the Berlin Data Protection Authority said, no, we forbid you to publish these data. And then I asked in my department, I told them this case, and although we are the open data department, there was one colleague who immediately said, oh, but what is with my insurance? I don't get insurance for my land anymore if it is seen that it is in danger of flooding. And another one said, what is about the reselling price? So, and that is the German angst that the gentleman in the front row said, that this is the German angst about data that comes even to geodata. And in the end, the maps will be or are already published. I'm not so sure about that, but it demands hours and hours of discussions with Bedenkenträger. I missed the English word.
Concern championship.
Yeah, and and when we come to law again, last remark, those data, if you see them as personal data, will never be possible to be open data, because we have the purpose limitation principle in data protection law, and open data are defined as data that may be used for any commercial or non-commercial purpose. That is never possible with personal data because of the purpose limitation principle, and there are no personal data that may be used for any purpose.
Thank you for that remark. I would now open the floor for questions if there are any. Matthias?
Good afternoon. My name is Matthias Schindler. I'm a member of civil society organizations for 20 years now. Actually, I've worked in compiling indices on open data preparedness as part of OKFN. So, David, I know how painful it is to compile the data and how misleading some results can be if not seen in a proper context. I think Germany got very lucky in these results. I looked at the CSV file. I would love to talk to you in detail about this, but please keep up the work because it's important. I have two questions. One is to Winfried. You correctly stated that Germany, on its federal and on its state level, is fighting tooth and nails to allow for the personal right to demand open data. Open data legislation in Germany is seen as the kind of, yes, the government may opt to release some data as open data, but we will never allow the individual to demand a specific file under free and open licenses. Based on my reading of the Open Data Directive and the DNG, the German implementation, I think this is utterly wrong. Even if the DNG does not mention the term application, there is still the spirit and the letter of the directive still contains the possibility to demand data that has been released under free and open license terms. So I wonder why you think that there is no such right at the moment, even if your government really tries to keep it this way. And one question to Bernardin. Lovely talk. You're spot on when it comes to contracting data. Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, the organization hosting us so graciously, has been deeply involved in many years in Eastern European countries to promote transparency laws, to fight this. At the same time, there is no consensus among governing parties, including Konrad Adenauer Stiftung's political mother party, to allow this kind of transparency in Germany. It's my impression that corruption is seen as someone else's problem, and that access to contracting data would not be in the German interest to allow this assumption to continue to exist, that corruption is not happening, that there's no cartel building on contracting, so on. Do you see any kind of angle to allow Germany to save face by introducing this law and at the same time keeping the status quo in some way? How do we move forward as Germans to increase transparency on contracting data? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I got the first question right, because I think we were talking about two different topics. The one thing is that there is this obligation to publish open data by authorities, but the same law says there is no right to get.
No, it doesn't say it.
There is no right to get open data. It's said in paragraph 12a, and this should be deleted right now. So there is an obligation to publish open data, certain machine-readable data, by the authorities. But the same law says there is no right, that the citizen has no right to go to the courts and say, you have to give me the data.
You're mixing access to information and access to your license or to the openness part.
I was not talking about the license problem. I think you were talking about the license.
Yes, of course. I'm talking about open data.
Sorry. Yeah. No, but I wasn't talking about that topic.
Oh, topic of the panel.
I'm not a license expert, so I can't answer the question about that. But for sure, if data are published as open data, yeah, you're nodding, so just...
Let's talk about open data. And if there is an expert on open data in the German government, please point me towards this person. My reading is that there are laws on access, such as the EFG, the Information Freedom Act, and the DNG would be the proper tool to say, okay, now that this data is publicly available, one way or another, now I have the personal right to demand licensing and access terms that would allow me to reuse the data in any means that I like.
Yeah, I would agree to that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great question that you asked about how we can move forward here in Germany. So I think the first thing that I will say is that we shouldn't, as a basis, we shouldn't be publishing data or sharing data for data's sake, right? Every time we publish data, we should be thinking about what we want to achieve from it. Like, what can the data do for us? Or what do we want the data to do for us? And sometimes it's fighting corruption, sometimes it's something else, right? And I think that it's not just here in Germany. In many places where we work, in many countries all around the world, there are sensitivities around publicly admitting to corruption or the prevalence of corruption in the way that public spending happens. And there are many ways to get around it. An indirect way is often to talk about competition rather than corruption. But at the same time, so like if you improve competitiveness, often it's a euphemism that there's something happening that shouldn't be. But at the same time, there are also lots of other use cases. So there are many things, and any government has many different goals and objectives. And if you get better at procurement, procurement can help you deliver on those things, right? So whether it's the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, whether it's something around healthcare, whether it's something around local industries, there are lots of different things that you can do. Increasingly, as I said earlier, we're being asked to help people deliver on either climate goals, equity, sort of social impact goals. There's a great case study in Palmyra looking at local industries, so looking at local farmers. So again, thinking about how to bring local farmers into the food supply chain. So the procurements that the government in Palmyra were doing, they were importing food from Canada, again, for school meals. And obviously it was very expensive. They weren't getting value for money. There was nothing untoward happening. It just so happened that they were buying grain from Canada when the area that they were in was a farming community, and there were lots of produce. And so when you look at that and you think about, well, how can we increase opportunities for our local businesses, our local suppliers, our local farmers? How can we bring them into the supply chain? You know, that's when things like magic really happens, right? So there, what they did there, again, looking at the data, they discovered many things, and then developed innovations and processes to enable these local farmers to participate. And now 30% of the value of all school meals are being procured from the local farmers. And there were lots of innovative things that they did looking at what was being planted, when it's being harvested, what produce is available, so that you know what to buy, right? So it's very hard to bring local produce into the supply chain if you're buying something that's not grown locally. So I think there are different ways. So the short answer to your question is that thinking about those use cases, local industries is one, internal efficiency is another. So very often people think about governments as monoliths, like everyone is one hive mind, it's all homogenous and everyone knows exactly what everyone else is doing. And obviously that's not true, and there are silos. We find that when you open up data or when you share data, the biggest user for good quality data are governments, government to government like data use. And we've seen from any number of use cases and case studies that we have that dramatically improves efficiency. And we've got some great case studies from Argentina as well, where we've seen like 90% increase in efficiency, just from the reduction of not having to ask for information, government to government department, wait for that information to come back, ask again, and then maybe many people are asking for the same information and then not getting it, right? So if you have that kind of data sharing, you get improved internal efficiency, better value for money, better resilience, climate goals, different things.
Thank you. So we have 3 minutes if there's any further question.
Very quick question for Wilfried. Google AI is producing, here's the website, flood forecasting for 80 countries, and it includes Germany. What do you make of it?
Yeah, double standards. The authorities are in Germany they stick to the law as they interpret it. If Google does something that is not lawful, you have to go to the Data Protection Authority and tell them to make a lawsuit against Google. But yes, that was my argument as well. Yeah. Google is doing it. Everyone is publishing perfect maps, and you can easily see who is living next to a nuclear plant. So that is publicly available data. I had the same reaction as you, but there are always people who are saying, no, it's not that easy. You need at least a legal ground for publishing those maps, because data protection law demands a legal ground. And that is not the GDPR, but a sector-specific law in Germany.
And so we hamper European, in that case, German innovation.
That's what you said. But I would, if I would be here privately, I would agree.
You want to add something on AI and public interest briefly? I think that was and one more question over there. Sorry.
You can take the question first.
Take the question first, yes.
So it's kind of cringy, I have to stand up. My question is, I think in June, the High Value Data Act is coming into force. Do you think there's somehow pushing Germany to rethink open data? I mean, public administration has to open their data.
Yes, I do think so. There's lots of discussions about this. My colleague from the Ministry of Economic Affairs is sitting there, and actually, again, a German speciality. We are differentiating between the obligation to publish data It's the Ministry of the Interior that is responsible for that. And for the further processing of those published data, there is another ministry and another law that has been done on that, the Datennutzungsgesetz, as Mr. Schindler just said. So it makes things really complicated. But yes, there is a big interest by the authorities that are obliged. We just had a round with 200 or 250 people taking part, and there is lots of legal uncertainty of how to do it and when to do it and in which form to do it. But yes, there is, people know that there is this date, and authorities are getting prepared right now.
Just to add on, can we make AI really work for public good? I think that's the question most of the countries are currently pondering about. And in India, what our thinking is, if we have any luck or chance to make AI work for public good, the only way towards it is by open data. So if you don't have open data around the several low-resource languages, India is a diverse country. We have 22 official languages, but hundreds of other spoken languages, written languages, which around which data is very, very sparsely available, and very, very less of it is digitized in nature. So if we have to make it work for all of the people, and if we can have specific use cases where the big tech doesn't provide the solutions, but the local innovations and the local startup ecosystem are able to generate solutions, then that locally available open data needs to be there for them to make a proposition. Currently, it's not a level playing field. I think only open data can make it a level playing field for everyone to actually provide a solution.
Just going to jump in very quickly on that, Gaurav, because I absolutely agree with you that I think the two big barriers, as you were saying, Gaurav, on AI for public good, and whether it's public procurement or something else, is the data. So absolutely agree. And the status quo as it stands is that we don't have enough data, particularly on public procurement data. We don't have enough data, and we don't have enough good quality data. So without that, as Gaurav was saying, you're not going to get any sense out of it. But one quick thing I wanted to add is that I think we also need to be realistic about what AI can do for us. And I think that there's a lot that AI can do. But in this sense, if you think about public procurement, there's only so much that it can do. If you think about corruption, for example, corruption in itself, it's really hard to detect. And it happens in the shadows. And obviously, there are tools and things like that help you to detect corruption. But it's not a perfect model. And the thing with AI is that you need to feed it something, right? So you need to feed it corrupt exercises and non-corrupt exercises from which it can learn to detect bad behavior. And because it's so hard to detect corruption, you then run the risk of identifying cases as clean when in fact it might just have an undetected case of corruption, and that perpetuates a problem. So I think the key point that I want to make is that we need to be realistic about what AI can do for us. And I think as it stands in its current form for public procurement data or maybe other public-owned data, is that AI can be very useful to do things that, to do things around like tedious tasks that you might not want to do, right? Because it can help to automate that, and that frees you up to do other things. So, it's kind of like handing off tasks to a very useful intern or an assistant, rather than actually being able to replace the existing models currently. But in the future, as we get more and more data and better data and more innovation, maybe that will change.
So is there any urgent question left? Because if not, I don't want to hold you up from your coffee break. And I just want to say thank you so much for your panelists for the great input. Also, thank you for Pancho. Okay, because here, at least in my train schedule, it was there's a break. So anyway, thank you so much for the.
Weber was silent on open data, simply listening. As you know, he was one of the most prominent voices when it comes to open data. But maybe he can use his argument at some later stage. Yeah, we continue with the next one. Many thanks.
Thank you.